Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Real Estate Experience, where we drop absolute bombs and golden nuggets with other high achieving, successful entrepreneurs and also investors in the industry. And I have Reed Goossens with Wild Horn Capital, who went from a 9-to-5 job in civil engineering overseas to getting started in 2011 and has now built his portfolio up to about, would you say, $60 million in terms of acquisitions that you've been able to make?
Actually, it's now 175 million, but we're not good. Who's counting, right?
Okay, all right. Well, my information is a tad bit dated, and thanks for those updates. And I'm very excited about jumping into the content. And one thing, those of you who are on the YouTube, don't forget, you know the next steps. Hit that subscribe button that's just below, whether that's on the left or the right, whichever side. And yeah, let's go ahead and jump into things where Reed would love to get just your just a spark note version, your 5% of ultimately what shaped you in your journey from just little Reed to now where you're at today.
Yeah, well, Sterling, thank you so much for having me on the show. I think we've had you and your business partner on my show as well, so it's nice to get back on your show. But yeah, the thing that keeps me going of a morning, originally was to get out, escape the 9 to 5, but I think the overall arching big fear is the fear of regret. And fear that I'll wake up at 65, 70 years of age and going, geez, I wish I'd given something a go. And so I really live my life by, you only live one life, you only live once, get out there and make it happen, and ask questions later. And so my whole story, as they can probably, your audience can probably hear, I have an Australian accent, that deep Southern accent.
Just a little bit.
Yeah, so we can get into that story in a little bit. But yeah, my big why is fear of regret and making sure that I am living we only get one life. We live it now and live it to the fullest. So yeah.
Yeah. And so through that is, I know we can unpack this at a later point too. You were involved with Summer Olympics at some point?
Yes.
Or, yeah. How did that come to fruition?
Well, so my background's in structural engineering, right? I went to university for structural engineering, and when I graduated in '07, I went straight to London. I had a job working overseas in London. I graduated university in Australia. Grew up in Australia, obviously. Went to university there, graduated in '07, and then in '08, '09, I went to London and I was a structural engineer working on the infrastructure, so this building stadiums and transportation systems in London for the London 2012 Olympic Games. And obviously games, I live here now in Los Angeles, they're already building stadiums and infrastructure updates right now in 2019 for the 2028 Games. So, there's a decade of infrastructure and building that goes on prior to any Olympic Games. And I was involved of one of the iconic stations in London called the Paddington Station. If anyone's ever been to London, the Paddington Bear, the big arches, to revamp that, and that was what I was involved with in anticipation for the London 2012 Olympic Games. But that was way back in 2008, 2009. So that's how I got involved in the London 2012. I wasn't actually an athlete, but we can all.
Okay. Yeah. And so with that, I know you made the move here in 2011, and that was partly due to, I think it was your girlfriend at the time, now wife. Congrats. Yes. And so through that, and you bought your duplex, also your very first deal. So what was it that ultimately got you the shift from a 9 to 5 that you formerly had, which, I mean, civil engineering, you would say, is well paid? Mm-hmm. And I mean, what obstacles or what barriers, if any, that you possibly faced that allowed you to make that shift, or you had to get through?
Yeah, well, let's talk about just the whole. So went overseas, graduated in '07, '08, '09 was overseas in London and in Europe, and was in the south of France working on these mega wealthy super yachts for Russian billionaires, and that's where I met Erica, who's now my then girlfriend, now wife. She's American, right? So spent 2 years abroad, went back to Australia in early 2010, and was back at an engineering job. I'd crossed the Atlantic Ocean on this mega super wealthy yacht, met Erica, fall in love with the United States. I also fell in love with New York City because I backpacked through the USA in 2009. And really being back in Australia after this great 2 years and on a high, sitting in a cubicle and going, what the F am I doing with my life? And really that epiphany of, I wish someone could pay me to live my life. How do I do that? And I didn't know. I didn't even know the word entrepreneur exists, and I didn't even know what an entrepreneur was. But then I picked up the book Rich Dad Poor Dad in the beginning of 2000, end of 2009, early 2010, and that really changed my perception of what I was essentially told. What we as in Western society are told to do: go to school, go to university, get a job, get a well-paying job, and retire at 65. That was the mission I was on. But I knew that when I got back from overseas, that I had more to give. I had more to give in life. I had more to give in. I felt like a star athlete sitting on the hardwood, on the bench, as they say, watching my life go by. And I really wanted to grab life by the, excuse my language, life by the horns and take control of it, right? And so that and Rich Dad Poor Dad helped paint that picture for me. From there, I went and started being self-educated in the real estate space. I said, this is exactly what I wanted to do, because Sterling, given that I'm also in structural engineering, I was already surrounding myself with developers and I was working on infrastructure projects that required capital and financing and all this. So really the blinkers came off. At that point I was like, hey, I'm in a pretty good position here to probably rub shoulders with some bigger guys, but I had to go out and learn just the basics. What's cash on cash return? What's an IRR? What's a cap rate? And I did that in Australia. So as soon as I picked up the book, Rich Dad Poor Dad, I start going to local real estate networking events, educating myself about the benefits of investing in real estate in the Australian market. And then we still continued to work. And Erica came out to Australia in 2011 and she did a year's master's course in Australia. And when she finished that, I was like, look, I really want to move abroad again. I really want to live in New York City. And, I had this well-paying engineering job and she had just finished her master's degree and she's obviously from the States. So it was easy for her. And so we said, screw it, let's give it a crack, and quit my job in late 2011 and early 2012. I'm in the Big Apple. We signed a year lease, but I only had 3 months to find a job because I came in on a tourist visa and I had to hit the pavement and walk around with my portfolio in my hand and just knock on doors until, engineering doors, that is, until an engineering firm said yes. And I remember writing out all the engineering firms on a piece of paper, and I tried to look for those engineering joints that had less than 50 people, because if they had less than 50 people, they wouldn't have HR, and HR would look at my resume and say, well, he's not educated here in the United States. These Australian universities are inferior to the United States universities. And it's like, screw you, there's a lot of that HR BS going on. And I, throwing your resume out online on Indeed.com was just a waste of bloody time. So getting out there, pounding the pavement, it made me feel good. And I'd walk into places and they'd be like, what the hell are you doing here? I was like, oh, I'm just here for a job. Do you have one?
And I really want to unpack that. The simple fact that you were able to, many people, and this even goes with finding deals, is they'll send either a direct mail or a cold call and they'll just leave it at that. But what I believe is doing what others won't do. The fact that you were able to just simply show up in office, and that shows the other person on the other end your level of seriousness.
Yep.
And then also the fact towards the beginning you mentioned about reading the book Rich Dad Poor Dad and then just taking action. It sounds as if you knew where you wanted to go, but you didn't take the time to really, okay, this is what I need to do. I'm sure you had a plan in mind, but you ended up just executing, committing first and figuring the rest out later, which is what I really love.
Yeah, sort of. Yeah, yes and no. The plan part, like when I first picked up Rich Dad Poor Dad and started going to those real estate events, I had no plan. I was just like, I knew I wanted to learn more. I was hungry to learn more. And that's all that I knew right then and there. I didn't worry about what's happening in 2, 3, 4. At that stage, when I picked up Rich Dad Poor Dad, I didn't even realize I was going to move back to the United States at that time. So this was, again, 2010, early 2010, and we didn't move back to the United States till early 2012. So there's 2 years of just self-educating in Australia. And I was going to do something with, I was going to guru seminars and all that sort of stuff. I was going to do a flip or lease option or whatever it was. But I knew I had to get back to surrounded by people who knew what they were doing. So it was really about going out and getting educated and just that hunger to learn more.
Understood.
Yeah.
And where do you believe that hunger came from for yourself? Is it the growth from the education? Because myself, I enjoy just reading and being able to, when I was in formal education, I was in college, ended up dropping out of my 5th year on a 4-year degree, but I was learning things that were not of interest. But now I'm learning things that I can apply to be a better person, overall business person. So for you, is that what really gave you that fire, or was it something else? And I know you mentioned a little bit about your why, but what was that fire for you to just take action?
Well, I think the beginning was the yearning to get out of the cubicle. That's what it was. It was
Okay.
to take control of my life, not have to, sit in a cubicle for 40 years. Like, this can't be what I'm doing. Like, just that feeling and sense that I needed more. I had more to give, and I knew I could be better. And I didn't know what that looked like. Being my and the idea of being my own boss was appealing. Running my own time at that time, I didn't understand that time is an asset, right? And we only get a finite amount of it, and we never get to buy that back. So it was really just a case of, okay, putting one foot in front of the other. Nothing more complicated than that. Picking up one book, going to a first seminar, going to real estate education, starting to surround yourself with people who are in the know and in the space. And from that, you'll be able to feed off them and take that next step. And then step number 3 and step number 10, blah, 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 and onwards
Gotcha.
and onwards, you keep going. So yeah, that's all it really was. But, and then the big, obviously, I wouldn't say kink, but the best decision in my life was because I was going to do something in Aussie. I really was. If I was going to stay there and keep working, I was going to do a flip or maybe a ground up construction or something, lease option. But I chose to spend some of that money, move halfway across the world and give it a crack in the United States. And that was the best decision I ever made. I was so freaking nervous about doing all of that, but I just did it. And that's where, I wouldn't be here today sitting talking to you if I hadn't taken that step. And another thing is, looking back on the last 10 years, it was 10 years ago that I picked up the book Rich Dad Poor Dad. So a lot has been achieved in those last 10 years. So,
that seems to be the staple of a lot of individuals. They have that. Think and Grow Rich is another book. That's a game changer for most people. I'm trying to think. It's a 4-hour work week. That was a game changer for me, from the sense that it's not about working 4 hours in 4 hours throughout the week. It's about putting systems in place and further pushing yourself up to where you can focus on the most higher value activities. But for myself, it took multiple, or even E-Myth is another book, is reading those books constantly, evolving as an entrepreneur to really start to understand, okay, that's what it means to work on your business versus working in your business.
Right. But you got to start somewhere before that. And that's a passion to create financial wealth and longevity for your family, or to leave the rat race, or to whatever that first why is, to go and then create a business, which is, happens to be real estate investing. That's just a vehicle that we use, you and I use to go and achieve financial freedom. But there's many other vehicles out there that you can choose to do. It's just that real estate happens to be the most safe and steady vehicle out of all of them. But then from that, it's, on our different, whys in my life. Why do I get up? My why 10 years ago is different to my why today. And that's okay, right? It evolves as we evolve, as humans, as entrepreneurs, as business leaders. So yeah, it's an incredible journey.
Yeah. And I would say most likely it was the Aussie, your accent that sold your significant other. I know that was for sure.
Yeah, mate, just on the beaches in Spain,
So I really want to impact more on the mindset element, which is one question I have. Just in the past 5 years, what new belief, behavior, or habit has most improved your life?
Oh, wow. It's now, given where I have come from, just for those people moving to the United States, didn't go to school here, didn't have family here, fresh in a relationship with an international person, moving to a new city, not having a job, visa issues, like you name it. I had very limited funds, didn't even understand what credit was or an LLC. Not that and the funds were my funds that I'd saved from working. But I had the nous and the willingness to back myself and give it a go, because the other side of the coin was, okay, if it doesn't work, if I don't get a job in the United States, if I can't make it happen, because the original reason to move here was just to work here for 2 years and be an engineer and just live abroad. That was all it was. And then to complete. But then when I got here to realize the barriers to entry here in the United States are so much lower than they are in Australia, coupled with all the other benefits, and we can get into it, we don't have to get into it, but there's a lot of other benefits as well. But really understanding that it was, okay, if the worst case scenario is if I didn't get a job, if I didn't get that visa, that I'd move home and, okay, get another job. That was the worst case scenario. And if that was the worst case scenario, then it's a walk in the park then, because you've allowed yourself the permission to see the other side of the coin. And if that is it, what's there to
Under,
lose?
understood.
Go give it a crack. So
Fair.
yeah.
And on top of that, what new belief or habit did you disregard? So, myself personally, just to give you one, is the value of time. I never realized. So, one thing that I do now is I outsource my groceries, I outsource my laundry. And I tell most people, why are you cutting? I spoke with the landlord the other day. He's talking about cutting his grass. I was like, why are you cutting your grass? It's such a low value activity. And of course, people are in different stages, but if you're somewhere and you're saying you don't have enough time to scale your business, it's looking at all the things that you can cut out. So what's one belief that you have recently that may have been a limiting one that you discard and replace with a new one?
Oh, limiting belief that I think the limiting belief that we all have is that ability that we can't. I think that we've achieved, we've stopped learning. The limiting belief that I don't want to, I can't take, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. That limiting
Understood.
belief of like, well, I can't go and learn how to do real estate, or I can't go learn how to start a business, or I can't go learn about financial freedom. Well, yeah, you can. That's a limiting belief. And if you stop learning,
Gotcha.
stop growing. And that's really, really, really important, because as a business leader, as an entrepreneur, if you're just getting started, and you look at all the big CEOs and Bill Gates of the world, and Tim Ferriss and all that sort of stuff, they're constantly continuing to learn about new things. And us as humans, we need to continue to learn, because again, if you stop learning and you think that you've achieved it and you think you know it all, it's the day you will fail, because that is the decision you've taken yourself out of the market of education. And so I put my blankets on and I'm just going to keep being told what to do. I know everything, and I'm not going to listen to anyone else. And that's where that limiting belief has got to stop. And you've got to just continue to grow and learn as a human and as an entrepreneur as we evolve in life. So yeah.
And I love the point you made about the Bill Gates and those higher achievers constantly reading, because they say the average CEO reads 52 books a year, which is a book per week, and the average person reads one book a year, and they don't even get through that book. And Warren Buffett spends hours a day reading, and it's just, if these guys are doing and they're achieving this level of success, then and this all goes back to where people are wanting to go to. I always have to go back to that, but it's just as you alluded to, if you're wanting to grow, that is a staple that you can replicate what others have done.
Exactly. Success leaves clues. There's all these sort of, memes that people say, but they do, and you got to follow those clues. So, but it's the ability to put away your ego. It's the ability to put away any inhibitions and go out there and say, I don't know how to do this, but that's okay. And I'm going to go learn. And I'm self-taught. I'm self-educated. Didn't know anything about the United States real estate market when I moved here, but went out there and made it happen, and just continued to keep learning.
And what other book that really unlocked certain either business principles or the way you think about, life in general?
I think a good one for me recently, it's more of the recent, obviously Rich Dad Poor Dad, we've spoken a lot about that. That's great for beginners or people just sort of getting started in this journey. Another great one's called Key Person of Influence. It's written by a gentleman by the name of Dan Priestley. He's actually an Australian, another Aussie. But he speaks a lot about, it's got nothing to do with real estate, but it's got a lot about how you position yourself in your industry to be a key person of influence, because you are a business, right? And your business will become recession proof when you, as the face, understand that you are a business and you provide value to others. And how do you be that key person of influence in your sphere? So in my case, it happens to be international investors wanting to come to the United States. Well, that's what it started with. And then I pivoted to be, more broad and attract a lot of different type of investors. But I could speak to, when I first started, the trials and tribulations of getting credit, understanding what an LLC was, understanding the benefits of how the United States works and the financing systems, understanding that you guys have a different type of lingo here in terms of investments. So I had to learn all this stuff. And if I can learn it with, limited funds, no college education here, but then go out and then preach it to others and become that key person of influence, then that's really the lesson. And so that is definitely a book I highly recommend to people if they get their hands on it. Key Person of Influence by Dan Priestley.
And I believe there's been a revision with Kevin Harrington too. Key Person of, have you seen that?
Yes,
okay.
Yes, I have. And he's also done Entrepreneur Revolution and 24 Assets. So it's a good series of books that Dan has done. I think Kevin Harrington, came out with either did the forward or excuse me, did something, was somehow involved with the KPI program. So
Yeah. And one thing that I've been watching you from afar, Reed, in terms of, I mean, the branding that you've done, how crucial, and I normally don't ask, but I would believe it's great for you and then also the audience. How important would you say personal brand is in this industry? Do you market through your personal brand or through your actual company when you're bringing on investors?
yeah, good question. And if you look at the funnel, it's the personal brand that's at the top. You know, the top people get to know me. They like my story. They like what I have to say. They like my attitude. They like my principles in which I lead myself with. You know, being humble. You know, feet on the ground, being transparent. Just being all around, call it an all around good bloke. You know, someone that you want to have a beer with. But
What is that good bloke? What
yeah,
was that good bloke?
all around good bloke. You know, BLOKE.
Okay, I like it.
So yeah, like that's my shtick, right? That's my thing. It's what I teach others about, you know, what they can do. It's find what your niche is. And really, when I first looked at my own niche, I was an Aussie. I had this weird accent. And when I started, I had all these inhibitions. No one's going to listen to me on my podcast. No one's got to, I've got nothing of value to give. But actually, we have to realize we are all standing on a mountain of value.
Mm-hmm.
And my mountain of value was that I'd moved to the United States. I had an interesting story, and I was going through these weird learning curves of credit scores and LLCs and EIN numbers, but there was all this benefits of cash flow here in the United States that I wanted to tell others about, and others were interested to listen. So that's how it started. And then the big thing is consistency. So once you start with your brand, once you start with your niche, once you start with your message, you have to be consistent. A lot of people, like I've started my podcast called Investing in the US. It's been going for 4 years now, every single week, nearly over 200 episodes. But it's consistency, right? It's not going to happen overnight when you start a personal brand. It's not going to happen overnight if you start a podcast or a thought leadership platform. But with consistency, will breed more people, bring more people into your sphere.
Awesome.
And that's how you become a key person of influence. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, I want to unpack that because there was a lot. Those of you who heard that, I hope you are taking notes. He was talking about the power of story, which is very vital. Consistency is key. And then even when it comes to where you're at, everyone has a story. It could be you just getting started and then the challenges that you're looking to overcome. It doesn't have to be of, hey, these are 18 steps to put together a syndication if you haven't put together a syndication. And then there was one more point, value. Love the point on value. And this is even when you're networking with investors, it's determining what problem or whether they're looking for deals and looking for a passive investment. That's the value that you create them versus having the mindset that you're just taking their money or just have to look at it as you solving their problem. And one book that really helped me in terms of the value of that thought process is Jab, Jab, Right Hook by Gary Vaynerchuk, which that's the content is you create value, value, value. And that's the jabs. And then the right hook is essentially the ask, whether that is invest with me. But majority of the time, people will just love your story and love the transparency that you have and decide to make the decision on their own without going for the ask.
Exactly. And I think the other thing we're sort of getting some very advanced topics of building brands and building companies and culture and all and mission statements and all that good sort of stuff. But when you do get started, I think also the one thing you talk about mindset at the beginning, and this is not a sprint. It's a marathon. Like the reason people fail at losing weight or losing or achieving a goal is because their mindset on the front end might not necessarily be the correct time frame. People are always like, I want to make it happen tomorrow, and I'm definitely, I'm a early millennial, but I always wanted to have it happen tomorrow. But I also got to realize that you can underestimate, as Tony Robbins says, you can underestimate what you can achieve. So you can overestimate what you can achieve in a year, but you can underestimate what you can achieve in a decade. And as I said earlier in the show, 10 years ago, I picked up the book Rich Dad Poor Dad. I'm now sitting here talking to you about the fact that I have $175 million under management and all this great sort of stuff and blah, blah, blah. And that's all well and good. But you also got to realize that it's taken 10 years to get to this point.
All the work, yeah. And the behind the scenes, the sacrifices, no one sees that. They just see the highlight.
They see that iceberg, that little, that picture of the iceberg with I think 95% of the iceberg's below the water. You got to realize, and it becomes this quest or the journey for becoming financially free needs to become part of your DNA It can't be that you think you can achieve it in 6 or 12 months. And there might be some people out there who can do that, and good on them. But the majority of us, including myself, it takes years, 5, 6, 7 years. And if you don't have that mindset on the front end, you are going to quit after 2 years because you're like, screw this, it's not working, and I give up. So
not only just quit, but if you have that mindset, is you'll look to take shortcuts that in the long run will hurt you, versus if you're thinking long term, that'll benefit you more in the long run.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
And
100%.
So now let's shift to the tactical. How are you finding deals, especially in today's economic environment? It's hot, but of course there's still abundance of deals. This is the abundance mindset. But how are you finding and still able to get ones that pencil out and give great returns to your investors?
Well, exactly what you just said then. Redefining what a great return is. And that is really what is important. The last 10 years has been so crazy in terms of particularly multifamily. I think you're involved in multifamily as well, commercial real estate. We have seen some stupid returns in the last 10 years. And people have got this expectation that this is what I'm going to get for the next 10 years. And I can sitting here telling you today, for those people listening, the next 10 years is going to be nothing like the past 10 years. And so you have to readjust your expectations in terms of returns. And I come from a country where if you double your money in a 10-year span, you're doing really, really good with your money. Okay. People have been doubling their money in 3, 4, 5 years in the last last decade, and they still think that's going to happen moving forward. Well, that's not the case anymore, because we are coming into long in the tooth in the recovery. There is a recession around the corner. No one really knows exactly what it's going to be. It probably won't be like the last recession because we're so bloody conscious of it that we won't repeat it. But what you have to do as a syndicator, as an operator, is go out and have conversations with investors and say, okay, well, 2 or 3 years ago, it was probably a 15 to 18% IRR. It's now around a 10 to 13% IRR. And that's still a really good return, and talk about returns. And maybe cash flow isn't right there on the first couple of years, but it builds to that. And talking a little bit about how the equity multiple, if you give me your money now and I double it in 7 years or 8 years, that's still a really good return. Right, so it's changing that investor expectations, and thus then deals start to pencil. We just closed on a deal with one investor. He brought all the equity to the table. He brought a bit over $7 million to the table. But his return expectation was he's like, I just want to double my money in 10 years. I want to have a 5% preferred return, cash on cash, and I don't care if it takes 2 or 3 years to get to it. Well, geez. Sterling, every single deal pencils at that, right? And so that is it's just about it's your function of equity. The reason deals aren't penciling is because, yes, they are spitting off lower returns because the market is hotter, but you have to then change your equities expectation. And that is on me as an operator. It's on you as an operator. It's on, it's about educating that it's still a great return and it's still safe in a growing market in, all the benefits of real estate. If you want to go and try and chase your 19, 20% returns, great, go and do that. But you're going to be in a high risk area. It could be ground up construction. It could be in a tertiary market where the economy terms and boom, it's no growth. So we're definitely, as a company, as Wildhorn Capital, we're doubling down on true growth markets where supply is tight, the demand is high, barriers to entry are even higher, which means that you to get new building approved takes 12 to 24 months. And so thus then we're going to drive up the value of my existing assets. So yes, I might be paying, lower cap rates for them, but over a 10-year span, we're going to go okay. And that's what you really have to, again, people are thinking it's the returns are not there. We're just plateauing. We're not going downwards. It's just plateau. We're not going up at a 45-degree angle like we used to in the last 10 years. So yeah.
And how do you have those conversations with, is it just a simple, an investor that is used to, let's say, 15 to 20% IRR, they've been investing with you consistently over the years. Have you ran into very many situations where you say, okay, normally this, just due to the tightness of the market, it's actually between 13 to 15%. How does that normally go with that?
Well, two things we're doing is we changed our structure on our return structure. It's different now. We have a 2-tiered system, and we just rolled that out. I brought that from, I think we're one of the first group in the syndication space to bring that out in terms of a 2-tiered system. We can offer a 10% cash on cash return to tier 1, but they get none of the upside on tier. So tier 2 gets an accruing 7% pref. It's not current, it's accruing. So it might be 1% year 2 or 3% year 3, and it'll accrue over the years. but then they get 70% of the backside. So when you take away
Oh,
25% of the equity from the back end profits, that IRR to the Class B investors or the Tier 2 investors is juiced, right? And so
gotcha.
you get a benefit. People get to choose where they want to sit. They might put a little bit in Class A and a little bit in Class B. So that means that deals can cash flow 2% out of the gate, and you can pay that 10% on 25% of the equity, because 2% on the entire equity means that you can pay 10% on 25% of the equity. Does that make sense? And so, yeah.
That probably went over quite a bit of the audience's head. But the thing is, with everyone, by hearing this more sophisticated talk, you may not be there just right now, but getting that knowledge in the back of your head, then in the future, once you decide to go structure and put together syndications, it'll start to make sense, because that's how it exactly was for me when I was hearing all these different, because when it, do you believe, Reed, that in the syndication space, there's only a what, in terms of there's a very select amount of lingo that you
Mhm.
use oftentimes.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. No, I agree. And sorry, that example that I went off on a tangent on was just an example of showing people, as an operator
Oh,
myself,
gotcha.
we're managing nearly close to $200 million in assets. We are reacting to the market as well. And thus we have
Gotcha.
to change our investment structure. And yes, it might have gone over the top of a few people's heads, but as you slowly get more in tune with syndications, you'll understand that even as operators, we're changing our structure to react to where the market is, and to react to what investors want and need. And to your point of
Gotcha.
how I'm talking to investors, we're saying, hey guys, I'm changing this structure. It's not like our old structure anymore. It's more of an accrual based structure, but we still,
Hmm.
you can sit in one class or sit in the other class of investor. You still get sort of the best of both worlds, but we're only limiting the Class A to 25% of the equity. So there's only a small amount available. So better get in quick.
Gotcha.
And that's how we are, as operators, changing the conversation and changing the tune when deals are quote unquote getting harder to pencil. They're not getting harder to pencil. It's just a function of your equity. So.
Understood. And I enjoy the fact that you mentioned about making the necessary pivots, because I believe that's what it's about. Being an entrepreneur in itself is,
Mhm.
if let's say your through your marketing channel is cold calls. If
Yep.
cold calls, if it's not working, or you're uh, if you're using that channel, it's dried up, then you maybe got to try direct mail, or you got to try SEO. It's just about making those changes, and you've applied it in terms of your deal structuring, and it's worked out for you.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think that's so important as entrepreneurs, people listening to this show, is not being afraid to pivot. If you've tried something and it's not working, that's okay. This is it's just a learning process. You'll go and pivot on to the next thing, and hopefully that's more successful and reaps more rewards for you as you move down the road. And it's like riding a wave. It's going to change, and we're
Hmm.
entrepreneurs. We have to be in this digital age. We have to change. We have to be accepting of change as things come down the line, and that's just part of growing. And that goes back to that education piece that I was speaking about the earlier of the show. Is that if you stop learning and you stop wanting to change or wanting to pivot or
Mhm.
wanting to grow, then of course you're going to be stuck in the water. You're going to be dead in the water, and your business, you're not going to
Yeah,
have a business in time.
I agree.
Look at Snapchat when Instagram came
Or
along.
Vine.
Or
Vine.
Vine. Yeah, look
Yeah.
at that. Just
I,
eaten up as soon as, because someone else came out and brought out a better product, and boom, off they're gone.
Yeah, and just the whole marketing landscape now is just making so many. I remember when Facebook made their changes in terms of their algorithm, that
Mm-hmm.
people, when you would post a piece of content, let's say you had 5,000 people who followed your business page, it would reach about 90 to 95% of those people. But now they've absolutely cut it in more than half, to where they make it pay to play. And Instagram's done the same thing. So it's different platforms. There's LinkedIn, there's now TikTok, all these various platforms now is just going on there and just leveraging. But that comes to doing your education and not being afraid to be able to leverage to your benefit.
Well, also, and just to those people, we're talking about tech, but how it's
Yeah.
a great example of that. They're constantly got to pivot. Like, think of MySpace back in the early 2000s when I was coming out of high school. That was a massive thing. It's nowhere in existence anymore. The flip Razor Motorola phone was the coolest thing hit since.
I love that thing. That was my favorite.
But now we've got a small, iPhone in our pocket, and so things become, and the way of thinking, the same with that when you're growing a business, you have to change your strategy. And to my specific business of real estate investing, we changed our structure in order to match the market. It was nothing special. It was just that, and our investors had to start to get used to it, and that's okay. So yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, we're going to switch over to the rapid fire sharing is what I like to call it. Woo! Okay, that's the little siren that goes off. A little cheesy there. So where I'm just going to ask some quick questions, and you just a fire round. So what is an unusual habit or absurd thing that you love to do or that you love?
So are you talking about like a daily habit that I do?
I would say anything.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, if we talk about daily habits, one thing that I love to do that's for myself and more like quote unquote self-care is obviously I love to keep physically fit. I think it's great for the mind, but I love surfing. Surfing is huge. And I try and get out at least once a week. And I live in Los Angeles, so I have my offices are in Hermosa Beach. Any of those folks who are listening who live in any of these areas, if you want to come say g'day, just drop me a line. So yeah, surfing, and exercise and meditation are probably some pretty good habits that I try. I've been working more on to keep that mind clarity to move forward with my business as trying to lead a business.
Gotcha.
So, yeah.
And the most interesting thing in the book I just read yesterday talked about surfing when you have to expect one to get wiped out. And when you do get wiped out, you have to be calm and just go with the flow versus
Yes,
if you start strangling around, that'll make things worse. So that's the
exactly.
same. So I thought that was interesting. I was like, wow, makes so much sense.
And dealing with Mother Nature, right? And where it can just be so brutal and it can pound you.
And so what is one common myth that you see in real estate that you can debunk?
Well, that's a good one. One common myth. So I think one common myth is that people, the myth is that they see other people's success and they're not willing to put in the effort and the hard work. And it goes back to that mindset that we're speaking about earlier of the show. And it's okay to give yourself a long time to get to where you need to get to, which is financial freedom or do your first deal or just get started. It's okay. It's your journey. I hear a lot of people saying, oh, I wish I got started in real estate 10 years ago. I wish blah, 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 blah. And the thing is like, that's a load of crock because at the end of the day, it's your journey and you're here right now wanting to get involved in real estate, to listening to Sterling's podcast, you're listening to other people's podcasts. That's okay. That's your journey. You don't need to change your past. The old Chinese proverb, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The next best time is now. Let's get started.
Yeah.
Make it happen. So yeah.
Love it. And yeah, I don't know what else to say to that. That's so completely true. And so what is one common reason you see people fail or just ultimately give up? I mean, does that just go to the short-term thinking?
Short-term thinking, and to your point, is giving up and not willing to grind, not willing to roll up the sleeves and say, yes, business is going to be tough. Yes, it's going to be hard to build a business. But so anything that's worthwhile building is tough, is challenging, does challenge you as a person. I know I've got a gray spot in the back of my head, and it's called the Wild Horn Capital gray patch. My wife gives me crap all the time about it.
Do you really have a gray patch back there?
Yeah, I do. She I'm 33, and she pointed it out to me the other day. But it's she jokes that it's my Wild Horn patch, and yeah, there's been stressful times raising capital and getting deals closed, and there'll be more stressful times to come. But it's how you have the mental clarity and calmness to deal with those stresses, and that's really the important part. And understanding that not everything's going to be success after success after success, and it's to that point before that iceberg. There's a lot of stuff that goes on below the water that you need to be okay with and need to be able to grind in order to get to that next point in your business.
So, and what is it for you? Is it your why that you ultimately, when you are in those tough times, that you look up to? And what is your why? Or is it more of putting in, you enjoy the work so much, that's what gets you through the tough times?
Yeah, look, it's about obviously being a custodian of other people's money. That's a very big why. But doing the right thing, surrendering to some things sometimes are out of your control and you can't control everything. And a deal may go south, and that's just it may happen. Right? Is it going to end your business? No, it's not. It's just okay. It might be one. Not saying that we've had one, but there's going to be one. Right? The law of averages that there's going to be a bad deal along the way. And like a lot of mentors around us who have advised us that there will be one along the way, and you've got to be okay with that. Got to and move forward and understand you do as best to the best ability you get. What if that ends up coming up? Gotcha. A bump in the road, that you can just smooth sail over it because you're being prepared mentally for it. You've done everything in your ability to make sure to avoid it, but ultimately, look at 2008. Who the hell thought that was coming? And
Not nobody.
People got wiped out.
I mean, some people saw it coming, but not very many.
Right. And that's just an example of how do you rebuild from something like 2008? And if 2008 was to happen tomorrow, how would you rebuild again? And that goes back to personal branding and all that sort of stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a whole nother conversation that we can really unpack, is the personal brand element. And last question we have here: what purchase of $100 or less has most impacted your life over the past 6 months?
$100 or less. I guess it goes back to reading. Reading books. You can probably buy 4 really great books for less than $100, and I bet you they change your mind on.
And all it takes is just one thing too.
Right.
And this is one thing I learned from someone influencer, Grant Cardone. Love him or hate him, everyone's out there, but he talks about some people, one objection they have is the cost of the book is, let's say, $30. But if you can get one ideal from that book that could just change your complete business, it pays for itself tenfold. So 100%. I really love that you mentioned the books, because that is so vitally important with the reading. And exactly. I actually have one last question. Why do you believe we're all on this earth, on this planet?
Oh, that's a good.
One too deep.
That's a deep one. The why we're all on this earth is obviously to make it a better place for everyone, to educate people, to in a glass half full type of look, is really to hopefully give back and enrich other people's lives, whether that's through education on podcasts, whether it's through helping people invest in real estate, whether it's through helping just your family get out of a tight situation from financing point of view. I think it is ultimately we're there to give as human beings, and sometimes we forget that with all the crap that's going on, politics and wars and greed, and really what it comes down to is setting aside your ego at the door, and having some compassion, having some empathy, and the willingness to want to help the fellow human. So yeah, that's all we are at the end of the day. We're humans. That's it. We're not animals. Humans.
And so Tony Robbins, I want to leave off with this, says his quote, "The secret to living is giving." Mm-hmm. And Zig Ziglar mentions, you help enough people get what they want, you'll ultimately get what you want.
Exactly. All right. 100%.
There we 100%. Go. And so how can people find you, Reed? And also, could you give them another plug on your podcast as well?
Sure. Yeah. So head to reedgoossens.com. That's ReedGoossens. I've got 2 new books. I've got my 2 books out. My first one's a best-selling author. I'm a best-selling author on Amazon, so check that out. It's called Investing in the US, The Ultimate Guide to US Real Estate. The second one is called 10,000 Miles to the American Dream, and I did that with 8 other Aussies. We all have a story of coming to the United States. So check out those 2 books. And the first one is really just all the best bits from my podcast into book form, in and around my story. And that should be coming out in Audible in January 2020. So keep your eyes peeled out for that. And again, everything's on reedgoossens.com. Head there if you want to. If you ever come through LA, or you want to grab beer or grab lunch, just
some surfing.
Some surfing, yeah. I'll probably let you drown, and I'll go out and surf myself.
Don't do that. Hopefully, we don't get. I'm not liable for that. No,
right. But you can hit me up at info@reedgoossens.com and just let me know when you're coming into town, and hopefully we can make it happen. If not, we'll get you next time around. So
awesome. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being on here, Reed, and sharing your knowledge. It's greatly appreciated. And those of you, as I mentioned, on the YouTube, hit that subscribe button, especially because we drop absolute bombs on this podcast, where we have others such as Reed, and moving forward, we'll have guests coming forward. So thank you so much for joining. Have a great one. Keep crushing it. Thanks for listening to The Real Estate Experience. If this has brought you any value, please subscribe and leave a 5-star rating. It would mean the world to me. Now go out there and crush it.